When evil teenagers face justice, some lose control completely. From a Russian murderer's death-defying ceiling escape to laughing killers taunting their victim's family, to a defendant who collapsed into hysterical screaming after hearing his sentence. These are 10 shocking cases where young killers went absolutely insane in court. Ronnie W. Amedon. Our first case takes us to the quiet town of Laconia, New Hampshire, where a seemingly simple domestic dispute would spiral into a courtroom scene that shocked local residents and highlighted serious concerns about mental health and family violence. At just 24 years old, Ronnie W. Amedon would become the center of a disturbing incident that began with something as trivial as cigarettes and ended with him being dragged screaming from a courtroom. The nightmare began on November 27, 2007, at Amedon's residence on Union Avenue, where he lived with his mother, Carol Paquin. What started as a simple request would quickly escalate into a life-threatening situation that would forever change both their lives. When his mother refused to buy him cigarettes, Amedon's reaction was anything but normal. In a fit of rage that seemed completely disproportionate to the situation, he retreated to a closet and retrieved a double-bladed axe. The scene that unfolded next was terrifying in its intensity and randomness. Amedon allegedly called his mother obscene names and threatened to kill her and any responding police officers. The threats were so serious and immediate that Paquin felt compelled to call 911 around 10 p.m., fearing for her life at the hands of her own son. When police arrived at the scene, they found Amedon inside the apartment. Though notably, he was not holding the axe at the time, it had been returned to the closet, perhaps suggesting some level of awareness of the gravity of his actions. During questioning, Amedon made the decision to admit to the threats, a choice that would seal his legal fate. He was immediately arrested and charged with criminal threatening with a deadly weapon, a Class B felony under New Hampshire law that carried the potential for 3.5 to 7 years in prison if convicted. But the most shocking part of this story was yet to come. The following morning, November 28, 2007, Amedon was scheduled for arraignment in Laconia District Court before Judge David Hewitt. What should have been a routine legal proceeding quickly devolved into chaos that would be remembered by everyone present. The courtroom erupted as Amedon completely lost control, shouting obscenities and physically resisting officers. The scene was so chaotic that it required 4 officers to restrain him, while his family members added to the mayhem from the gallery. The breakdown was so severe that Judge Hewitt not only set bail at $5,000 cash, but also ordered a competency hearing to assess his mental fitness for trial. Up next, we explore the case of Christopher Gribble, a 19-year-old from Brookline, New Hampshire, whose participation in a random thrill killing would shock the nation and demonstrate how evil can lurk behind the most ordinary facades. Christopher Gribble. This wasn't just a case of teenage rebellion gone wrong. This was calculated, premeditated murder carried out for no other reason than the sick pleasure of taking human life. The horrific events unfolded on October 4, 2009, when Gribble, along with 17-year-old Stephen Spada and accomplices Quinn Glover, William Marks, and later Autumn Savoy, broke into the home of Kimberly Cates and her husband David in Mount Vernon, New Hampshire. The group, calling themselves the Disciples of Destruction, had selected the house at random for a thrill killing as an initiation rite. The timing couldn't have been more tragic. David Cates was away on business, leaving his wife Kimberly and their 11-year-old daughter Jamie alone and vulnerable. What happened next was a scene of such brutality that it defies comprehension. Spada used a machete to hack Kimberly Cates to death, inflicting 36 blows to her head and torso, while Gribble stabbed Jamie Cates multiple times with a knife, severing her foot and causing severe injuries. Miraculously, Jamie survived by feigning death and was later able to call 911, becoming the key witness who would help bring these monsters to justice. With Gribble going into the very minute and intricate details about what happened on that night, legal analysts argued that it wasn't possible that he was insane and could only be of sound mind. Listen to what Gribble says about the incident.
At one point, I heard like a and then some of the screaming stopped, and not long after that, I kind of reached in and stabbed at the form in front of me.
When charged, Gribble pleaded not guilty by reason of insanity. During the trial, when Gribble took the stand, the prosecution did their best to prove he was actually of sound mind when he committed the cold murder.
When were you legally insane?
When was I legally insane? Well, I think technically I'm legally insane now.
You're saying you're legally insane.
I'm saying as my defense, yes.
you not believe in your defense?
After a long trial and heart-wrenching proceedings, the judge deemed him mentally competent and sentenced him.
You are sentenced in New Hampshire State Prison where you will remain incarcerated for life without any possibility of parole.
Judge Abramson imposed the mandatory life without parole for first-degree murder, along with consecutive sentences totaling approximately 76 additional years. From the snow-covered courtrooms of New Hampshire, we travel across the globe to Moscow, Russia, where one of the most bizarre and disturbing courtroom escapes ever captured on camera would unfold. Leonid Grazer. 18-year-old Leonid Grazer, whose name would become synonymous with both fratricidal horror and desperate courtroom acrobatics, represents a case so extreme in its violence and subsequent legal dramatics that it seems almost too incredible to be real. The nightmare began in late 2019 in a suburban apartment in New Moscow, where Grazer lived with his 21-year-old sister, Ariada Korol. What should have been a safe family environment became the scene of one of the most ritualistic and disturbing murders in recent Russian criminal history. Grazer stabbed his sister multiple times. Estimates range from 25 wounds to descriptions of severe slashing, leaving her naked body in the hallway of their apartment building, but the killing itself was only the beginning of this descent into madness. Grazer allegedly performed ritualistic acts, drawing demonic symbols with her blood on both her body and his own head. When police arrived at the gruesome scene, they found Grazer naked and praying, claiming that Satan or Lucifer had ordered him to commit the murder as a means to free him from Satan. The scene was so disturbing that even hardened investigators were shaken by what they encountered. Then came December 11th, 2019, a date that would live in infamy in Russian legal circles. During what should have been a routine hearing, Grazer attempted a dramatic escape from the bulletproof glass cage. The footage of what happened next is almost too incredible to believe, yet it was captured on video and quickly went viral around the world. He climbed through a gap in the cage's roof, broke through the ceiling, tiles, and tried to crawl away. For several terrifying minutes, viewers watched as bailiffs intervened, grabbing his legs, using batons, and even a taser to subdue him.
Your hand.
The struggle was so intense that he lost his trousers in the process, but was eventually pulled down and handcuffed. The incident lasted about 3 minutes and was captured on video, which went viral. Instead of a traditional prison sentence, he was sentenced to compulsory psychiatric medical treatment in a psychiatric hospital. This indeterminate sentence is reviewed every 6 months to assess his medical condition, with the possibility of release only if he's deemed no longer dangerous to society. Further details of the verdict were not disclosed, as per Russian law protecting psychiatric cases. In the scorching heat of Las Vegas, Nevada, 2 teenagers would commit a crime so senseless and cruel that it would shock even a city accustomed to violence and excess. Jesus Ayala and Jesemir Keys. The horrific events unfolded on August 14, 2023, during what can only be described as a day-long reign of terror through Las Vegas. The spree allegedly involved stealing multiple vehicles, intentionally striking 2 cyclists, and other offenses, but it was the deliberate murder of Andreas Andy Probst that would capture national attention and forever cement these young men's place in the pantheon of evil. Andreas Probst was not just any victim. He was a 64-year-old retired police chief from Bell, California, who was cycling in the Northwest Valley near Tenaya Way and Centennial Parkway. A man who had dedicated his life to protecting others was enjoying what should have been a peaceful retirement morning when these 2 predators targeted him for their sick game. The courtroom behavior of these 2 defendants would prove to be almost as shocking as their crimes. During their court appearances, their complete lack of respect for the legal process and the suffering they had caused became abundantly clear to everyone present.
Victim's family says the behavior between the 2 in court shows they have 0 respect and 0 remorse.
He just kind of trying to mad dog us and intimidate us, which didn't work.
Jesus Ayala and Jesemir Keys smiling at the widow and daughter of Andy Probst as they leave the courtroom Tuesday.
The audacity of their behavior was breathtaking.
The teens appear to communicate with each other, at times covering their faces and also laughing.
I'm not scared.
You are 100%.
The legal constraints of their age at the time of the crime mean that Nevada law prohibits the death penalty or life without parole for offenders under 18. If convicted of first-degree murder, the maximum sentence would be life with parole eligibility after 20 years, though other charges could carry 2 to 20 years each, potentially consecutive. As of July 28, 2025, Jesus Ayala, now 19, and Jadmir Keys, now 18, remain in custody at Clark County Detention Center, awaiting their November trial date. The case continues to generate significant public interest and outrage, particularly due to the viral nature of the murder video and the defendant's shocking courtroom behavior. In the quiet, suburban community of St. Johns County, Florida, where families move to escape the violence and chaos of bigger cities, a monster was hiding in plain sight. Aiden Fucci. Aiden Sean Fucci, born November 5, 2006, was just 14 years old when he committed one of the most brutal and senseless murders in Florida's history, a crime so vicious and premeditated that it would shatter any illusions about the innocence of youth and force a community to confront the unthinkable reality that evil can lurk behind the most ordinary teenage facade. The victim was Tristan Bailey, a vibrant 13-year-old cheerleader who should have been looking forward to finishing 8th grade and all the typical milestones of adolescence. Instead, on Mother's Day, May 9, 2021, her life would be cut short in the most horrific way imaginable by someone she considered a friend and classmate. What happened next in those dark woods near their Durbin Crossing neighborhood can only be described as a sustained act of pure evil. Fucci lured Bailey to a wooded area and stabbed her 114 times with a buck knife, inflicting what the medical examiner would describe as 49 defensive wounds to her head, neck, shoulders, arms, hands, and back. The sheer number of wounds tells the story of a young girl fighting desperately for her life, while her attacker continued his relentless assault long after any human being would have died from their injuries. The case took an even more disturbing turn when it was revealed that Fucci's own mother had attempted to help him cover up his crime. Crystal Smith was charged with tampering with evidence for washing his blood-stained jeans and was eventually sentenced in May 2023 to 30 days in jail and 5 years probation. Initially pleading not guilty, Fucci changed his plea to guilty on February 6, 2023, just before jury selection, avoiding a trial that would have forced Bailey's family to endure even more graphic testimony about their daughter's final moments. The sentencing hearing that followed would be one of the most emotionally devastating court proceedings in Florida's history. It was during his pre-trial proceedings that Fucci attempted what appeared to be an elaborate performance to avoid responsibility for his crimes.
I don't let you demons. I don't let you demons take my soul. You demons will take my soul away. I don't let you demons steal my soul.
When the judge declared that his alleged demonic possession would not be considered, Fucci's condition miraculously improved. Aiden would eventually go to trial for his crimes, and the judge declaring that his alleged demonic possession would not be considered. Judge R. Lee Smith, who presided over the case, faced one of the most difficult sentencing decisions in Florida legal history. The defense sought 40 years, while the prosecution and Bailey's family demanded life. After carefully weighing the factors involved, including Fucci's age, 14 at the time of offense, the premeditation involved, his sole participation, and the trust betrayal, Judge Smith imposed the maximum penalty available. On March 24, 2023, Judge Smith sentenced Fucci to life imprisonment, describing the crime as heinous, atrocious, and cruel, with no motive other than Fucci's desire to kill. From the sun-soaked campuses of Florida, where young people are supposed to be building their futures and chasing their dreams, comes one of the most perplexing and disturbing cases of friendship turned deadly. Damon Kemp. 19-year-old Damon Kemp was a music engineering student at Bethune-Cookman University, and he seemed to represent everything positive about youth. He was pursuing his education, had no prior criminal record, and appeared to be a young man with a bright future ahead of him. But beneath this normal exterior lurked something dark and violent that would explode with devastating consequences on December 7, 2018. The setting was the Jade Park apartment homes in Daytona Beach, Florida, a complex that housed many students from nearby universities. Kemp had been staying temporarily with two 19-year-old friends, Trey Ingram, a former BCU student and boxer from Palm Beach County, and Jordan Payton, also from Palm Beach County, in apartment 434. These weren't strangers or enemies. These were friends who had opened their home to Kemp when he needed a place to stay, an act of kindness that would ultimately cost them their lives. The trigger for the violence was pathetically mundane. Earlier that day, Ingram and Payton had asked Kemp to leave, a reasonable request from roommates who may have been dealing with their own housing arrangements or personal issues. news. What should have been a simple conversation between friends about living arrangements would instead become the catalyst for a double murder that shocked the local community and left investigators struggling to understand the motive. The murders themselves were brutal and calculated. Police reports indicate the shootings occurred as Ingram and Payden attempted to escape, with Ingram shot 4 times and Payden 6 times near the apartment door. The positioning of the bodies and the multiple gunshot wounds suggested that these young men knew they were in danger and were trying to flee when Kemp cut down their escape. After the shooting, Kemp fled the scene, jumped into a nearby pond to evade capture, and was arrested shortly after. The charges filed against Kemp reflected the serious nature of his crimes. He was charged with 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of burglary of an occupied dwelling with assault or battery while armed. The second-degree murder charges suggested that while the prosecution believed Kemp intentionally killed his former friends, they couldn't prove premeditation, though the multiple gunshot wounds and the victim's attempts to escape certainly painted a picture of deliberate violence. But it was Kemp's first court appearance on December 9, 2018, that would cement his place in the annals of bizarre courtroom behavior.
Meantime, back inside the courtroom, we watched as Damon Kemp was wheeled inside, screaming and calling on a higher power.
God! God! God!
His facial expressions and his mood seemed off as a judge read his charges and his fate.
The defense team would later attempt to explain Kemp's behavior and his crimes through various theories. His defense claimed possible insanity due to drug experimentation, daily marijuana use and other substances, or a traumatic brain injury, though no evidence supported this. The attempts to find some medical or psychological explanation for his actions spoke to the difficulty everyone involved had in understanding how a seemingly normal college student could commit such violence against his friends. After a 4-day trial, a jury convicted Kemp on May 26, 2023 of 2 counts of second-degree murder and 1 count of burglary of an occupied dwelling with assault or battery while armed. The conviction meant that this young man, who had been studying music just years before, would now face the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison. Judge Case, who had presided over the trial and heard all the evidence, was unmoved by the defense's arguments. She rejected the insanity and brain injury claims, stating there was no evidence and describing the murders as cold-blooded. She imposed 3 consecutive life sentences, ensuring Kemp would spend the rest of his life in prison without parole eligibility on the non-murder charge. The case of Erica Mae Butts represents one of the most heart-wrenching examples of betrayed trust and systematic child abuse in American criminal history. Erica Mae Butts. What makes this case particularly devastating is not just the horrific nature of the crime, but the fact that the victim, 3-year-old Serenity Richardson, was placed in the care of someone who was supposed to love and protect her, her godmother, and her mother's childhood best friend. Erica Mae Butts, a 25-year-old resident of Summerville, South Carolina, worked as a caregiver and had no significant prior criminal record. She lived with her partner, Shanita Latrice Cunningham, also 25, in what appeared to be a normal household in the Lakes of Summerville subdivision on Congaree River Drive. When Serenity's mother, Ishia Richardson, left her daughter with Butts and Cunningham for a 2-week visit in late October 2009, she believed she was placing her child in the care of people who loved her. The final day of Serenity's life, November 3, 2009, began like so many others in that house, with violence and cruelty. The abuse culminated when Serenity was whipped for urinating on the floor and forced to consume excessive amounts of water and grape juice. This forced consumption led to hyponatremia, water intoxication, brain swelling, and death. Even in her final moments, these monsters showed more concern for themselves than for the dying child in their care, as Butts called her own mother, not 911 initially, when Serenity's breathing became shallow. Cunningham was arrested first on November 6, 2009, followed by Butts. Both women were charged with homicide by child abuse under South Carolina Code, Paragraph 16-385, a felony carrying 20 years to life. The case horrified the community and drew national attention, highlighting failures in child protection systems and the vulnerability of children placed in informal care arrangements. The evidence against them was overwhelming. Prosecutors had Butts' confession to whipping Serenity, forensic reports showing systematic abuse, and witness statements. Assistant Solicitor Elizabeth Gordon emphasized the torture's duration and brutality, noting Serenity's cries were ignored. The prosecution painted a picture of 2 women who had systematically tortured a helpless child while ignoring her screams and pleas for mercy. Judge Richardson was profoundly affected by the photographic evidence of Serenity's battered body. The gravity of what she had witnessed weighed heavily on her as she prepared to deliver the sentence.
The severity of the blow to that child's leg, and to say that you did not recognize what had been done to ignore what must have been the excruciating sounds that came from that child on a daily basis is more than disconcerting to this court. And as such, the court finds it appropriate that each be sentenced to the State Department of Corrections for a period of life. You will get...
When Judge Jefferson announced the sentences, life without parole for both defendants, the courtroom erupted in a scene that would be replayed millions of times on video platforms around the world. Upon hearing life, both collapsed. Cunningham fell first, hyperventilating. Butts writhed hysterically. The collapse was total and dramatic. Court officials dragged Cunningham out on a chair and peeled Butts from the floor, wheeling both away. The outburst, captured on video, went viral, drawing international attention to courtroom security and emotional reactions. The footage became a phenomenon, viewed millions of times by people fascinated by the complete breakdown of two women who had finally been held accountable for their monstrous actions. In the gritty streets of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where poverty and violence often intersect in tragic ways, a senseless act of violence would claim the life of a promising young student and reveal the depths of evil that can exist in someone barely out of childhood. Shawndell Jackson. Born around 1991, he was just 18 years old when he committed a murder so random and brutal that it would shock a city already accustomed to street violence and leave a community questioning how someone so young could be so utterly devoid of humanity. The victim was Nathan Potter, a 21-year-old University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee film student who represented everything positive about young adulthood. He was pursuing his education, following his passion for filmmaking, and building toward a future filled with promise and potential. On July 6, 2009, Potter was simply walking to his apartment in the River West neighborhood, 2500 block of N. Dousman Saint, when his path crossed with Jackson and his accomplice, Derek J. Thomas, 20. What happened next was a robbery that turned deadly, not because of resistance or fear, but because of the pure evil that resided in Jackson's heart. Potter had no money on him when Jackson and Thomas attempted to rob him, a fact that should have ended the encounter with perhaps some frustration, but no lasting harm. Instead, Jackson's response to finding an empty wallet was to shoot Potter in the head, killing him. Jackson's trial began in February 2010 in Milwaukee County Circuit Court, presided over by Judge Rebecca Dallett, now a Wisconsin Supreme Court justice. The prosecution's case was strengthened significantly by Jackson's accomplice, as Thomas pleaded guilty to felony murder in March 2010 and cooperated, testifying that Jackson was the shooter and leader. The sentencing hearing on April 16, 2010, before Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Rebecca Dallett, would become the scene of an unprecedented courtroom brawl.
At his sentencing today, 19-year-old Shawndell Jackson was facing a mandatory life term for pulling the trigger, but hoped for a chance at parole, a hope dashed by Judge Rebecca Dallett, who gave him life without parole, sparking the outburst.
Judge Dallett's decision to impose life without parole was influenced not only by the heinous nature of the crime, but also by Jackson's disturbing behavior throughout the proceedings. His lack of remorse and continued antagonistic behavior toward Potter's family demonstrated a complete absence of rehabilitation potential. When the life sentence was announced, Jackson's true nature was revealed once again. Upon hearing the life sentence, Jackson erupted, spitting obscenities at the judge, glaring and taunting Potter's family, and resisting deputies. He was wrestled down, pepper-sprayed, and subdued by 3 deputies and a detective, creating chaos. The sentence was comprehensive: life without parole for first-degree murder, 5 years for attempted armed robbery, and 5 years for the non-fatal shooting, with a total effective sentence of life without parole. From the rural courts of Mississippi comes a case that perfectly encapsulates the explosive intersection of domestic violence, mental health issues, and the kind of courtroom chaos that can erupt when someone completely loses control of their emotions and actions. Sidney Ray Newsom. A resident of Magnolia, Mississippi in Pike County, Sidney Ray Newsom would become infamous not for the gravity of his original crime, but for the absolutely unhinged way he responded when the justice system tried to hold him accountable. The initial incident that brought Newsom to court was tragically common: a domestic violence charge stemming from an altercation with a family member. Domestic violence cases often involve complex family dynamics, cycles of abuse, and deep-seated emotional issues that can make legal proceedings particularly volatile. volatile. What made Newsom's case extraordinary wasn't the nature of his original offense, but what happened when he found himself facing the consequences of his actions in Pike County Justice Court. On January 7, 2021, during an arraignment or hearing for the domestic violence charge, Newsom appeared before Judge Aubrey Rimes. The proceeding should have been routine, a reading of charges, perhaps some discussion of bail or conditions of release, and scheduling of future court dates. Instead, it would become one of the most memorable examples of courtroom violence ever captured on surveillance cameras. The transformation from cooperative defendant to violent attacker happened with startling speed. What followed was a sustained physical assault on both court personnel and the judge himself. Surveillance video captured Newsom breaking free from a bailiff, throwing papers and a telephone at the judge, and lunging toward him despite being handcuffed. The sustained nature of the attack, involving multiple projectiles and physical confrontation, demonstrated that this wasn't a momentary loss of control, but a sustained assault on the court's authority and personnel. For the 2021 courtroom incident, specific sentencing details for the contempt charge are not publicly detailed in media reports. However, Mississippi statutes allow for criminal contempt penalties of up to 6 months in jail and a $500 fine. Given the prosecutor's decision not to pursue simple assault, the outcome was likely limited to contempt. Our final case takes us to the college town atmosphere of Oxford, Mississippi, where a promising student transformed into a violent criminal whose courtroom behavior shocks everyone who witnesses it. Daniel Stewart Berry, the drug-fueled headbutter. Daniel Stewart Berry was, by all accounts, a typical college student pursuing the American dream of higher education. A 21-year-old business major at the University of Mississippi, Ole Miss, from Brandon, Mississippi, with family in Tupelo, Berry represented the kind of young person that parents hope their children will become: educated, ambitious, and apparently on track for a successful future. But beneath this veneer of normalcy, Berry was struggling with substance abuse issues that would ultimately destroy his promising trajectory and reveal a capacity for violence that shocked his fellow students and the broader community. On February 7, 2017, Berry was arrested for the robbery of the West Union Quick Stop convenience store on Highway 30 in Union County, Mississippi. Berry's problems didn't end with the robbery arrest. While in custody at the Union County Jail, Berry allegedly assaulted a jail worker who brought him dinner on February 8th, demonstrating that his violent tendencies weren't limited to the original crime, but extended to anyone who came into contact with him while he was under the influence. The courtroom incident occurred on February 9th, 2017, and would become the most memorable aspect of Berry's case. While shackled and being escorted to court for his initial appearance, Berry shouted expletives, became physically aggressive, and headbutted a Union County deputy, breaking the deputy's nose. Video footage of the incident went viral, showing Berry lunging despite restraints and being subdued by officers. Following the courtroom assault, Berry was initially charged with 1 count of strong-armed robbery for the store incident, with 2 additional counts of assault on a law enforcement officer added after the jail assaults. His bond was set at $200,000, and he bonded out shortly after, though the multiple serious charges meant his legal troubles were far from over. The case serves as a stark reminder of how synthetic drugs can transform ordinary college students into violent criminals capable of shocking behavior. Berry's journey from business major to viral courtroom attacker illustrates the devastating impact that these substances can have on young people's lives and decision-making abilities. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other awesome videos on the channel. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.